Good day everyone, my name is Isahac A Dalawis from BSED English 1A. And today I will be discussing the definition of intellectual disability, what it means, how it changed over time, and how different organizations define it. So now, let us begin. So now, what is intellectual disability? The terminology for intellectual disability has evolved over time, moving from outdated, stigmatizing labels to more respectful and appropriate terms. This shift was formalized in 2007 when American Association on Intellectual and Developmental Disability, or AAIDD, updated its name and adopted intellectual disability as the standard term. Okay? So the language used to describe intellectual disability has changed greatly over time. In the past, words like idiot, imbecile, and feeble-minded and simpleton were actually used by doctors and educators to classify people based on the severity of their condition. However, as society became more aware and respectful, these words were recognized as harmful and stigmatizing. They were then replaced by the term mental retardation, which was considered more professional at that time. Eventually, even that term was replaced, and in 2007, the American Association on Mental Retardation officially changed its name to the American Association of Intellectual and Developmental Disability, or the AAIDD, marking the shift to the term intellectual disability, the most accepted and respected term used today. Number 1, definition according to IDEA, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or the IDEA, defines intellectual disability through 3 criteria. Okay, so IDEA is a United States law that ensures children with disabilities receives a proper education. So it provides a legal definition of intellectual disability based on 3 conditions that must all be presented at the same time before a person can be identified as having an intellectual disability. So these 3 criteria work together to give a complete and accurate picture of a condition. Number 1, significantly sub-average intellectual functioning. A score of 2 or more standard deviations below the mean on a standardized intelligence test, an IQ score of approximately 70 or lower. So this criterion focuses on a person's ability to think, reason, and process information. It is measured through a standardized IQ test where the average score is 100. So a person who scores 70 or below is considered to have significantly sub-average intellectual functioning, meaning their thinking ability is much lower compared to most people at the same age. This low score alone, however, is not enough to diagnose intellectual disability. Okay, so it must be combined with the other categories. Number 2, significant difficulty with tasks for daily living, or the adaptive behavior. So adaptive behavior refers to the collection of everyday skills that a person needs to live independently and function well in society. So this includes like basic skills such as dressing, eating, communicating, managing money, and like following social rules. So a person with intellectual disability often struggles to perform this task at the level expected for their age. So this difficulty in daily living is just as important as the IQ scores when identifying person with intellectual disability. Number 3, deficits in intellectual functioning and adaptive behavior must occur during the developmental period, which differentiates intellectual disabilities with other disabilities of cognitive impairment such as traumatic brain injury by Hayward et al. 2017. So for a person to be identified with intellectual disability, both the low IQ and the difficulty with daily tasks must appear during the developmental period, which is generally before the age of 18. So these requirements is very important because it distinguishes intellectual disability from other conditions that affect thinking, such as traumatic brain injury, which can happen later in life due to an accident. If the difficulties only began after the developmental period, the condition would not be classified as an intellectual disability under IDEA. Now, next we have the definition according to AAIDD, or the American Association of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. So AAIDD defines intellectual disability as significant limitations in both intellectual functioning and adaptive functioning occurring before the age of 18, guided by the 5 assumptions. So the American Association of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities offers a definition that goes beyond just identifying the condition. It also provides 5 key assumptions that must always be considered when applying a definition. These assumptions ensures that the person is evaluated and understood in a fair, complete, and respectful manner, taking into account their environment, culture, and individual strengths. So number 1, limitations must be considered within the context of the person's community environment with regards to their age, peers, and cultures. Okay, so meaning, a person's limitation should never be judged without considering the world that they live in. Okay? So their abilities must always be compared to people of the same age, cultural background, and community. For example, a skill that is expected in one culture may not be expected in another. Okay? So this assumption reminds us to always look at the bigger picture and avoid making unfair comparison. Number 2, a valid assessment considers cultural and linguistic diversity as well as differences in community, sensory, motor, and behavioral factors. Okay? So when assessing a person for intellectual disability, the evaluation must be fair and appropriate for that individual. It must take into account their language, cultural background, and any differences in how they communicate or behave. So an assessment that ignores these factors may produce inaccurate results which could lead to a wrong diagnosis. Every person deserves an evaluation that truly reflects their abilities. Okay, so always remember that. So number 3, limitations often coexist with strength within the individuals. Okay, so meaning a person with intellectual disability is not defined only by their limitations. Like everyone else, they also have area where they are capable, talented, and strong. For an example, a person may struggle with academic tasks but may excel in music, art, or social skills. So this assumption encourages us to see the whole person, not only by their difficulties, and to also appreciate and build on their strengths, because always remember, not everyone are on the same level. Number 4, limitations are described for the purpose of profiling an individual's needs and support. Okay, so the goal of identifying a person's limitation is not to label or look down on them. Instead, it is to understand what specific support they need to live and function better. By knowing where a person struggles, educators, caregivers, and professionals can plan and provide the right kind of help and resources that are most suitable for that specific individuals. Okay? So number 5, the life functioning of the person with intellectual disability will improve given appropriate personalized support over a sustained period. Okay? So this assumption carries a very hopeful message that with the right personalized support, a person with intellectual disability can grow and improve over time. So support may include educational programs, therapy, community service, and other resources designed especially for the individual. So when these supports are provided consistently and appropriately, the person's disability to function independently and participate in society can significantly improve. And that's what matters there, right? To improve that specific person. Lastly, we have the definition according to APA, or the American Psychiatric Association. Okay, so APA 2013 defines intellectual disability as deficits in general mental abilities that results in impairment of adaptive functioning across different areas of daily life. Okay, so the American Psychiatric Association reminds us that intellectual disability goes beyond just having a low IQ score. It involves real difficulties in general mental abilities such as reasoning, problem solving, planning, abstract thinking, judgment, academic learning, and learning from experience. So these mental challenges then affects how a person manage their daily life. Specifically, a person may struggle with communication, finding it hard to express themselves to or understand others. So they may also have difficulty with social participation, such as making and keeping friendships. In terms of academic or occupational functioning, they may find it hard to keep up in school or perform tasks at work. Lastly, they may struggle with personal independence, needing help with basic tasks at home or in the community, right? So the APA's definition gives us complete view of how intellectual disabilities affect a person's everyday life. To sum up everything, all three organizations define intellectual disability in the same general way. A person has significantly lower thinking ability and struggles with everyday tasks, and these difficulties must appear at an early age. IDEA, or Individual with Disabilities Education Act, simply checks if a child qualifies for a special education by measuring their IQ and daily living skills. AAIDD, or the American Association of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, goes deeper by reminding us to consider the person's background, recognize their strengths, and to provide the right support to help them improve. And then lastly, we have the APA, or the American Psychiatric Association, focuses on how the difficulties in thinking directly affect a person's ability to communicate, socialize, study, work, and live independently in daily life. So overall, all three definitions agrees that intellectual disability is not just about low IQ. It is about how a person thinks, functions, and lives every day. And that concludes my presentation on the definition of intellectual disability. We have seen how the definition has evolved over time, from harmful and stigmatizing labels in the past to more powerful, respectful, and person-centered definitions today. Through the definition provided by IDEA, AAIDD, and APA, we understand that intellectual disability involves both limitations in thinking and difficulties in daily living. Most importantly, we have to learn that people with intellectual disability deserve to be seen, respected, and supported. As a future educator, let us carry this understanding into our classroom and commit to creating a learning environment where every student, regardless of ability, is given the opportunity to grow and succeed. And thank you very much for listening. That's all for my report. Good day, everyone.